Hello and welcome to part 5 of my video series, How to Install a Shingle Roof. We are going to be going over a California style valley, the installation of a B-vent flashing, and how to adjust your stagger pattern. So let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a short piece of starter. Now you can either start with a short piece of starter and then a full starter and then a full shingle, or you could start with a full starter and then a small shingle, but I prefer to start with just a small starter. I'm going to nail that in, and then I'm going to complete with full starters all the way to the hip, at which point I am then going to run a line of shingles parallel with the valley metal, approximately 2 inches out, leaving myself a 4-inch valley, 2 inches on either side, and I'm going to run that line of shingles all the way up to the top of the valley. At this point, I'm going to start running full shingles up the valley. I'm going to just butt up the bottom corner with the edge of that running line of shingles going up the valley. I'm then going to install another full shingle on top of that, and then I'm just going to have a quick look at how big my stagger is. So we can see here that the natural stagger coming off of this is 5 inches, or about that. Now this is acceptable according to RCABC. However, I am going to be cutting each shingle run just a few inches shorter than the one below it, just to give a larger offset, as well as show you how to deal with resetting the stagger pattern once you get to the smaller shingles at the top. Bear in mind, the only reason we're getting a 5-inch stagger is because this is a lower slope. At steeper slopes, such as 9/12 or 12/12, you will have to cut each run, because if you don't, the stagger that comes off of a steeper slope will not be sufficient either to RCABC specifications or to manufacturer specifications. Basically what this means is on lower slope roofs, 412, you do not have to cut every shingle. You can just go full shingles all the way up. On steeper slopes, you will have to cut and adjust every row. And I'm going to keep going up multiple rows, but I don't want to go all the way to the top. I want to kind of stop and fill in the other side about halfway up. This way it will ensure that I don't go too crooked, and if I do go crooked, I'll have time to fix it. Also, you'll note that I'm keeping the same nailing pattern as you would with shingles in the field, which means I'm putting a nail 1 inch in either side, and then 2 nails in the middle, 13 inches in. Fortunately, with the California style valley, I don't have to worry too much about putting nails too close to the valley, because they're naturally kept out of the valley, versus the standard style of cut open valley, where you have to be very cognizant of keeping the nails away from the valley. The only way you can really put a nail too close on a California valley is with that first starter. So make sure when you're putting in that first starter, you are keeping your nail a good 6 inches out of the valley. And when you are completing to the hip, just cut it back. It doesn't have to be exactly to the hip. The hip cap will cover a fair distance, so your cuts don't have to be super accurate. So I'm going to keep shingling up until I get to a point where I have basically the shingles as small as I want to go, and then we're going to fill it in and have a look at how we're going to readjust our stagger. And now I'm getting to the point where I'm going to stop using small shingles next to the valley, and I'm going to go back to a full shingle. So in order to make sure I don't mess up and put any nails in the keyway of the next run, I'm just going to put 2 nails in that full shingle there until I know where my next full shingle is going to line up. And now I'm going to have a look and see where that next shingle lines up. And then I'm going to put 2 more nails in the shingle below, just keeping them well away of where that shingle lines up. We do want, for full shingles, a minimum of 4 nails, or 6 nails if we're on a particularly steep slope or if there are high wind conditions. And as for the small pieces along the hip, if we want to put a nail into the exposed portion of the shingle near the hip, as long as that nail is going to be covered by the ridge cap, that's perfectly acceptable, and this can help keep some of these smaller shingles attached properly. And we're going to switch gears a bit here and talk about how to make adjustments as you're coming into your rake edge. Here we can see that we are just 2 inches short, so we don't want to put in a 2-inch width shingle. So I'm going to first show you the wrong way of dealing with this situation, which is what we call a Dutch lap, which is where we overlap a smaller shingle by a full shingle. This will cause a noticeable buildup on that one spot, which will both just look ugly as well as cause small issues with reduced wind uplift capacity. Okay, so now we're going to see the right way of doing it. Now, we don't want to cut off just 6 inches because that means it'll line up with the other key line. So instead, we are going to cut off at a minimum of twice our offset. So I go twice, and then I look and I see where the nails are going to be. I have a nail there, I have a nail there, so I'm going to just go further back until I can cut a line where it's not going to line up with any of the nails on the lower shingle. So I can see I'm about 3 inches away from all the nails. This is a good sized piece. And we're going to fasten this piece in and then finish off with another piece going all the way to the rake. Now on that piece there, I'm only going to nail each end. So I'm going to nail one end and then the far end. That size shingle will probably need another nail or 2, but I'm not going to nail it right away. Instead, I'm going to wait and see where my next shingle lines up. Now I'm going to see where my next full shingle lines up. And then I'm going to add more nails to that lower shingle, making sure it's away from wherever that keyway is going to be. And now I can just go back to shingling as normal, following my stagger pattern. Okay, let's talk about installing vents. Continue shingling up to the vent until you get to the point where when you install the new vent, the bottom of the flashing extends to or past the exposure line. So we can see here we're already a couple inches past, so we are ready to install our B-vent flashing. When fastening down your vent, try and keep the nails to the edge and where they will be covered by the shingle above. Then RCABC requires on metal vents that a horseshoe patch of ice and water is placed over the top portion of the vent, and then that ice and water patch should be tucked under the next course of underlay. Now we want to cut our shingles within about a 1/2 inch of the upstand of the vent to leave a nice 1/2 inch gap. So we're going to make little marks, a 1/2 inch either side, and then we are going to cut up to halfway through that vent, making straight cuts downwards. And then once we've done that, we are going to start in from the middle of those two cuts at a height a 1/2 inch above the vent, cut a nice half circle, and this should leave a nice little 1/2 inch gap around the entire vent. As you can see, all of the ice and water should be covered. And then when we are fastening, we want to make sure we are keeping our fasteners away from the upstand. This is especially important in plastic vents, as they will often require no fasteners penetrate the flange anywhere where there's not a pre-drilled hole. So as a general rule, you should keep all your fasteners for your shingles past the flange of your hardware, and that'll keep you out of trouble. Okay, and now we're just going to finish with that last cut around the vent. And after that, we are going to install some fasteners at the bottom of the vent. You won't always need to do this, but when installing exposed fasteners, make sure you're using cladding screws with neoprene washers. I like to keep them on the inside a bit, not on the edges, to avoid water from tracking in on the sides. I also like to have them a little bit inside of the actual upstand itself, so that they don't see much water. Okay, well, that wraps that up. This was part 5, installing California Valley, B-vent flashing, and adjusting your stagger patterns. This pretty much does it for this video series. I hope this helped you out, and have a great day.